Welcome to episode 123.
Musings on Shamanism.
Join us and our special guest, Kimberly,
who is a repeat from episode 22,
as she discusses her intricate dance with a shamanic practice, as well as an astrology practice and a witchy practice.
Stay tuned. Welcome to the Witchy Wit podcast, where we look at life through a witchy lens. I'm Kimberlyn.
I'm Leilani.
At Witchy Wit, we explore current events,
Ideas,
music and books,
and experiences in ways that recognize energy and life in everybody and everything.
We are both real witches.
And we bring two real perspectives through the lens of our different ages,
Races,
and backgrounds.
with a healthy skepticism for what we have been told is true. Our conversations are raw, candid, and vulnerable.
Join us as we cast a spell to uncover what we each know is true in our intuitive, witchy selves.
Welcome to episode 123
Musings on Shamanism
with Kimberly.
with Kimberly.
Yay!
Yay! So I'm super excited because is this our first repeat?
I think
I think so. Yeah, our first repeat. And we had Kimberly in our first season, episode 22, a pagan.
Pagan feminist astrologer, I think.
I think that's what it was called. Yes, it was a lot of fun.
And now we're having Kimberly back because it's 4 years later, and just kind of seeing a little bit about how you're thinking about shamanism now. The world has really changed a lot in 4 years, and just kind of seeing where you are and what you're thinking about, because we actually didn't do a whole lot with that. We were talking more about the astrology.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm excited. I don't get to talk about shamanism as much as I'd like. I read about it, I do it, but I don't get to have the discussions, especially from a witchy perspective.
Yay.
So, in most of the shamanic circles I'm in, people are not necessarily identifying in that kind of way. And so this is exciting because we get to talk about it from a witchy lens.
Yay!
This is one of the reasons this is my favorite podcast.
Excellent. So thank you for saying that, because actually that'll really help our listeners, all 7 of them, if you could tell us a little bit about shamanism because the idea of thinking about it through a witchy lens is a little bit different, right? So if you could just kind of give us just a little bit of your thinking about shamanism, maybe shamanism today, and then we can keep going into how you do shamanism.
So first, let me just say that the word shaman, shamanistic, shamanism are very charged words, and a lot of people view them differently. And I'm not going to say anyone's point of view is right or wrong. I'm just going to talk about from my point of view.
For sure.
To me, the difference between shamanism or a shaman and anyone else who does what I like to refer to as trance magic, that's the way I think of it. There's a difference in that there are traditions that go back pretty much unbroken. They may have changed more or adjusted over the time, and they go back to, megalithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic, to the point where we were creating farm and agriculture or beyond, earlier than that.
Right.
Then there are other forms of trance magic that have happened since then that can be very old. Things can go back to the Iron Age. It's pretty old, but they were created from the lens of a more civilized, quote, air quote there, society, a structured society, a hierarchy of society, often a patriarchal society. So to me, that's the big difference. And I also like to say, to honor that difference, because I think somebody who's practicing something that they have a cultural lineage attached to that goes back, I just want to honor that is different, not necessarily better, but definitely different and deserves that honoring than something that has perhaps been recreated. And so to that extent, that's like my long-winded disclaimer.
No, that's great.
So I think that in common terms, when we use the word shaman, it is a generic term now that is used to denote somebody who is a more or less the majority, because obviously every culture and every group and every person can do it their own way. But more or less, you're looking at someone who's an animist. In other words, I believe that everything in this world is inspirited. whether it's organic or not. It is inspirited. And those who practice any kind of form of shamanism often are going into an altered state to go to other worlds or other dimensions or other planes of existence to connect with those spirits that surround us and or embody the things with us. That's like a really broad general definition that I think probably applies to most people who are practicing some form of shamanism. And then underneath that are a gazillion different traditions and styles and ways.
Yeah, thank you. That's actually a pretty powerful definition for me. So it seems to me, just thinking about it, that pretty much there are shamanist traditions or shamanist practices kind of throughout the world. I mean, like on every continent. I think of different cultures that have shamanistic practices. Would you agree?
Yes, I think if you go back far enough, we all humans at one point were practicing some form of shamanism. And it's just that some of those forms have been lost or erased, and some have been maintained.
Wow. Yeah. So could you talk a little bit about now what you think about, when you think about shamanism for you, not necessarily if I don't know, I know sometimes people don't like to share their practices, but what does that mean for you? Like what, of that broad definition, what's specific to you to the extent that you're willing to share?
Yeah. So I guess let's back up and just talk about like how my journey, like how I got into it.
That'd be great. Yes.
And that'll explain, I think, of my personal perspective. So as is often the case, but not always, as is often the case, I came to shamanism. I was already identified as a witch. I was already on my astrology path. I don't think I had started it as a full-time profession yet, but I was, on that path, and that was the goal and where I was headed. So I was very woo, in other words, right? I was in the world of woo.
Yeah.
And I had a year where I had some major life transitions. As often is the case, people are brought to shamanism, and I think one of the reasons it's growing in popularity right now, shamanism and animism are two words you hear about. I mean, you can't go on TikTok without being inundated, which is, on the one hand, kind of nice it's coming. I think it's that people are recognizing our world is in crisis. Crisis and periods of transition, challenges often are doorways that can open us up to these paths. So I had a really wonderful experience and a really horrible experience at the same time. In 2013, the end of that year, I became a homeowner, which for me was huge. It was a huge life transition. I was the person who only bought furniture from Pier 1 because it had to be lightweight and mobile, because I was transient enough or wanted the option to be able to move in the future and move my stuff. So the idea of putting down roots and buying a home, like that was big, and it shifted my sense of identity in a really wonderful way. And about 6 months later, I had a really horrible experience where my mother transitioned across the veil. And at that time, it was very interesting. So she was out of state. I went and took care of affairs. I came back, and because I was working for a hospital, I had broken my arm. I was in a cast, and there was no such thing as light duty. You're either working or you're not. So I'm in this like grief-stricken space, and I can't go back to work. And normally I would throw myself into my work. And I can't throw myself into the home because I got a broken arm. So what am I going to do? And I had been looking at taking a class on shamanism that was being offered in San Antonio, and I'd put it off, and I don't know that I want to spend the money, but oh man, I really feel like it's calling to me. So I messaged the person and said, is there any, it was like 3 days before the class started. I said, are there any openings? Yes, there are. There's one opening. Take it. So I went and did that, and that was my first sort of introduction. And that was with Michael Harner's started a group, the Foundation for Shamanic Studies. Okay. Everybody uses the same word, so I always have to stop and think. What do they call themselves? And for those who are not familiar, Michael Harner was, I believe, a cultural anthropologist. He was one of many who started in kind of informing the uninitiated back in the day, that when we didn't know about shamanism other than just the word, kind of started to educate a lot of us, did a lot of research. And the foundation that he started teaches what they call cross-cultural practices. So it's not specific to any one tradition. It's what are the practices that are taught or practiced or used in many different shamanic cultures. Not all, but many, the majority, you might say. And so I felt comfortable with that because it's, I'm not misappropriating anything, and I'm going in and I'm learning, and it felt so natural. This idea of, I was like, journeying is, for anyone who's a witch and does aspecting, it kind of, to me, has a strong parallel. And it made sense. And I instantly kind of went down that rabbit hole. I took several classes over the years. I read tons of books, and over the course of time, and I need to say, like, Michael Harner, the Foundation for Shamanic Studies, most of my classes I took with Charles Conatzer, who's one of their faculty. And then I went into Shamanism Without Borders online. It's a subgroup of, I think it's the Society for Shamanic Practices. It's a subgroup where you can go in, you Zoom, and we are tending world issues. So every month there's a call, and you can show up online, or you can request it to be, it's recorded, you can request it to be sent to you. So most of us will do it the day before, the day of, or the day after, to kind of tap into that energy. And we are doing the shamanic practice. Somebody's leading it. It's always different. So you get exposures to different people's ideas or ways or methods. And it's also a way to connect collectively. And we send to Mother Earth. We send when there's world disasters. We might send to a specific group of people. It's really amazing. So I highly recommend that for anyone who's interested, to check them out. And then from there, Tom Cohen was one of the founders. He's a board member, was one of the founders involved with it. And he is the first person I encountered who is a Celtic shaman, or at least that's kind of how he's commonly referred to. Two words that are broiled with issues. I was gonna... Right? We'll talk about that, I'm sure, in a bit. But it's so funny. I'm like, a person who, like, I can get, as you know from our last episode, I can get very hyper vigilant about words. And I'm like, great. I use these two words that are just, like, loaded with linguistic colonialism. Okay, but that's fine. So he was the first person I came across who was talking about Celtic shamanism. And he wrote an amazing book, Fire in the Head, and has gazillion teachings and books and classes. So again, I went down that rabbit hole, and I'm like, this feels right. And around that time, I was learning about epigenetics a little bit, because I've never been a person who was super duper into the I must do things. I feel like I'm a very typical American in that I don't have a strong identity with my cultural past. Broad speaking, cultural past. My family, it was primarily Portuguese, Canadian, French. I identified with I had a lot of cultural influences growing up from some of the Portuguese side, but that was 3 times a year when I was visiting family. And the rest of the time it was sort of, I'm searching for that identity. And so I didn't necessarily resonate with Celtic and as a strong personal tie or bond. And yet all the stuff I'm reading made so much sense. And what I realized is, well, Celtic is also a broad word. It's not a group. It is not a unified belief. It goes far and wide. And if you go back far enough, there are things there that are extremely animistic, shamanistic, trance magic. And I heard somebody, I'm sidebarring here. I heard somebody one time talk about that if you are a shaman who is from a Aboriginal, indigenous tradition where your shamanism goes way back to those ancient days. To me, it's like you have a job of being an archivist. You have to preserve that tradition. Control how much cross-pollination happens or doesn't happen. Who do you teach to? When do you teach? How, there's a preserving energy that has to happen. But for those of us on the other end of the spectrum, we're excavationists. We're having to go back and find those pieces that make sense that have been lost. So I feel like there's a lot of personal gnosis involved, as well as kind of some excavation that has to happen. So, and around this time, I'm learning about epigenetics, and I'm learning how, I'm carrying the DNA of my foremothers. whether I feel a strong emotional tie or not, so maybe I should learn a little of this. And appropriation was becoming common language around that time. So I also was feeling, I think I need to learn what, my foremothers did, as well as what I'm taking on or learning now. So I started going down that rabbit hole. And after working with Tom Cohen, I did some classes with Jane Burns, who you can find online.
And may I put some of these names in our show notes?
I would love it. I will send it to you,
yeah.
because I think it's important to honor our teachers and our lineage, and even if it's a self-created lineage like I have, it's important to have that and to share that. I also read Amantha Murphy wrote a book about the way of the Shaban. I'm saying it wrong. Shaban. Rhonda McCrimmon is easy to find online. And now, these are all people who are doing quote-unquote Celtic shamanism, but one is Scottish, and one is Irish, and one is an American who studies the Irish. So, when we say Celtic, it's broad, right? It's not necessarily just... I'm not following a specific Irish Celtic thing. So I'm working with them, and it was amazing, and suddenly I'm realizing, oh, there's a lot here. There's so much here, and I feel like I'm healing my own genetics of what was there. I feel like I'm honoring my lineage. I feel like I'm not misappropriating somebody else's. I'm looking for where there's shared common threads. So that's like the long-winded brief version of kind of my journey.
No, I find that really fascinating. Do you want to? It looked like okay. I find that really fascinating, particularly as you talk about this gnosis, this kind of self-awareness, and then as you're mentioning the Celts, we constantly were coming up, not against it, but coming up with that, how that far that lineage, that culture spread, because during the Camino, that was all the...
I didn't know that Spain was one of the Celtic nations.
Oh yeah.
So I mean,
all the way from the Celtic peoples, if we're talking, and that's the other thing. Okay, Celtic. Are we talking about linguistic? Are we talking about the genetics? Are we talking about a culture that still exists today? So some people talk about Celtic and they mean Ireland, or they mean Ireland and Great Britain and all the Isles, or do we mean like ancient Gaul, France, or so? I mean, it's a word that's just loaded with multiple options. So this is a multiple option test. Pick the answer, and I always pick all of the above.
Yeah, all of that. Yeah, exactly. So thank you so much for sharing that. And so in your studies, when you said it felt right, what does that mean? I mean, like, what was?
So there was an innate knowing, like I felt it in my bones. That I knew more or less what to do just as the words were being said. It's like when you're in a trance and the next part of that guided meditation, the words before they're being said or as they're being said. It's like you're in that zone or that flow or that energy. It also felt right in that there was nothing contradicting my personal cosmology, my beliefs, like often I go to things and I have to navigate. No biggie. I go to some community ritual and they're working with the god and the goddess, and that's not necessarily my jam, but I can navigate. I can in my brain kind of say, well, this is sort of like this, and work from that place. I didn't have to do any of that. There was no needing to negotiate in my mind how what was being said outside resonates with my inside. I didn't have to find a way of making the match. They just did. It was, yes, the terminology might be different. Somebody might be going to the upper world or the lower world, because there's in most teachings that I've come across, the idea is that the majority, and I'm using these words very intentionally, the majority of quote-unquote shamanic cultures have a three-world structure. There's an upper world and a lower world. Lower world, ancestors and maybe spirit guides, animal guides. Upper world, kind of the guides that have more of an anthropomorphic form, is how it was explained to me. In the middle world where we live. That's not kind of my system, but that's a common analogy that's put out there. And where was I going?
well, you were talking about the part that how it just felt right.
Yeah,
and
it
how
felt right.
Yeah,
So I might have to change the words. Like, we're going to do a journey to the upper world. And I'm like, okay, well, it's other. Okay. But other than that, other than those little nuances, it all fit. And I think it's because at the heart of it, most people drawn to any form of shamanism is probably going to be a person who at their heart is an animist. And therefore, we're all coming from this. It's not about a belief. And that's the other thing I really don't like when we put the ISM suffix on the word. Like shaman or shamanic are words I use. Shamanism, I know it's used and it's on a lot of books and it's there, but I don't like it because ism to me implies a organized philosophy. Buddhism, Confucianism, communism, like these are words that are isms. There's a body, there's text, to do shamanic work means that one is going into their own innate nature and connecting with the spirit realm in their own way or their cultural way. It's not universal. There are universal themes, like we're going to another dimension, but it's not universal person to person. So I try to shy away from that.
Yeah. I was going to ask something else and it just give me. Okay. Yeah. Okay. So can you share with us a little bit about what your practice is like?
Sure. Yeah. So there's the personal practice and then there's the healing practice. So because like some people who are doing this are really focused on divination. Some people are focused on healing. Healing tends to be the one I hear the most, where most of our focus is going. It's really about a gift you're doing to another person or to the earth or to your community or your clan or your tribe. Like it's as the ability to kind of be the bridge and navigate and to bring harmony and balance is a form of bringing healing. So that's where a lot of the things are focused. So for me, I have personal practice, and that is really about trying to return to a place of balance. Not there yet, but I'm working on that. I like Celtic shamanism focuses a lot on the power of the word and your speech. And I find that I use my words very carelessly in everyday life. I sometimes speak out of turn. Sometimes I speak without thinking. And so I'm working on bringing more awareness there and bringing healing and bringing balance. I also do work with nature. I like to try to find places of power where I can sit. And for a long time, that place of power was just opening the gate in my backyard. We have a green belt behind us. It was very wild and untamed. And now it's being developed by the city into a beautiful walkway for others to enjoy. But that means that a lot of the wild have moved further down. And I'm realizing I need to go find more places in nature and make more time for that. So a lot of my practice is around that and around offerings. Some people say sacrifices. I like the idea of offerings, libations. I try to do offerings that are culturally appropriate to my lineages. So I tend to do a lot of milk and honey, or make little that was that applesauce flour clay kind of looking things that will naturally dissolve. And a lot of that is just sitting and being with myself and being with the world around me and going into a mild trance to sense what are the energies around me. This whole idea that we don't have to go somewhere else in order to have the experience. The experience can be right here where I am because the world is full of energies, right? The world is full of beings. Some of them happen to be human, is what I heard somebody say one time, and I loved that. And the others can be animals or energies or elements or something else. So it's really that sitting and opening your witchy eyes, going into a shamanic state, seeing the energy that's right around me right here, right now. So there's a lot of mindfulness kind of built into that. So that's where a lot of my energy goes. And then once a month, as I mentioned, I will do the Shaman Without Borders call. And that is sending energy to a healing that's been designated as something that's current right now, that's happening, that needs healing. Then there's the healings that I do for others. A lot of times I'm doing that as sort of a distance healing. I have an altar. I like to use rattles. I love drums when I'm trying to go into a trance state, but if I'm doing healing, rattles, it's like that's the thing for me. So I use my rattles. I do alternate energies. I try to do what is commonly referred to as soul retrievals, extractions. These are words that are used a lot. You try to figure out what is it that needs to be released from a person. We take that out and then we try to put something in there. So that could be finding some power animal or power energy. That could be about going somewhere else and helping somebody maybe find a part of themselves that has splintered off or been quote unquote lost and bring it back. It varies on the scenario, the person, the situation. So those are kind of the different things that I do a lot. And then part of it is also the learning. What I'm finding is that if I'm going to be doing excavation, I got to go find things I don't already know. And quite frankly, I don't want to become a cultural anthropologist, but I know people who are, that I can listen to and I can learn from them. So one of the groups that I read a lot from is ASWM, ASWM, the Association for the Society of Women in Mythology, and I might be butchering the name, but something to that effect. And here you have scholars who are studying the history of the goddess. Especially for me, what I love is when people start talking about goddesses ancient. Okay, shamanism is about ancient traditions that have come, and we know that in the world of Celtic shamanism, a lot of those traditions were not written down, and a lot of them were lost. And a lot of them even got started more Iron Age and didn't go back. But people didn't arrive in Ireland or Scotland and nobody was there. There were people there, right? And we talk, the three of us, we talk a lot about the syncretism that happens. So if you peel back the layers of Christianity and you peel back, this is what I mean by excavating, right? Peel back the layers of Christianity, peel back the layers of Romanization, peel back the layers of Germanic, Nordic, Anglo-Saxon. Okay, what was there? And what was there was initial cultures was probably more matriarchal, was more goddess related. So who and what was there that could not be erased, demonized? They got maybe married off or maybe pushed to the fringes. I really like the ones that got pushed to the fringes. So, you talk about Bridget. Christians work with Bridget. Pagans work with Bridget. Bridget was around long before. I'm pretty sure Bridget worked within a animistic society at one point in time and could not be erased. Epona could not be erased, had to be incorporated, right? The Cailleach from out in Scotland did not get, forgotten, was still there permeated. Now maybe the stories got twisted, got changed. And we've talked about this before, from the Levant, like the stories of Lilith and how she got changed. So who are the goddesses that still remain, that go back and are pre? And this is what I learned from listening to these amazing women researchers is talk about, well, they're really pre-Celtic goddesses. We call them Celtic today, but they're pre-Celtic. To me, that's where it feels right. And that's where the personal gnosis happens. And that's where I feel like my witchy self and my shamanic self and those Celtic lineages, they're all intertwined. There's a beautiful, trifold energy there happening.
Trifold.
Yeah. Trifold. If you know, you know.
Would you be interested in sharing more about your unique perspective as I don't want to label you things, but your witchiness with your shamanicness?
Yeah. Well, I think it's stuff. There are elements of. Let me back up. So I would never say that to be a witch is the same as to be a shaman. However, there are elements of things we do as witches that are very much the same practices. Like I was always taught, never call yourself a shaman. Call yourself somebody who uses shamanic practices or shamanic techniques. Because that's what's in cross-cultural groups, that's kind of the thinking, right? Okay. Well, I feel the same thing about being a witch. We use a lot of shamanic practices. We just don't call them that. And in, trance magic to me is that beautiful blending of it. It really, I do that in both worlds. So like as a witch, okay, we work with fae. We can do aspecting if we've been trained and taught about that. And for those not familiar with aspecting, there's a prior podcast that was great that I highly recommend. I think that was season 2 or 3. I don't know.
Yeah, I like that she's recommending our podcast.
Yes, it was really good. It was really good. But we do things that are out of body. That is like the first step of doing work. In fact, most of the time, when I've taken any kind of training or class, the very first thing we do is let's have a journey. Like, it's about getting out of body, out of what is often the terminology that's used is we want to get into non-ordinary reality. There's ordinary reality, ordinary reality where my mind lives. And it's easy to get locked into thinking this is real. And then there's non-ordinary reality that surrounds me, envelops me, lives this life with me. And if I choose to go into a trance, I can see that, hear that, connect with that. So first and foremost, it's to get comfortable trancing. And to me, that is the stage that overlaps the most. You know, when we do trance as witches, when I do trance in terms of something shamanic, it feels very similar. Now, the difference is that in shamanic teachings, what will often happen is now that I'm in a trance, I go somewhere specific. Like I mentioned earlier, there's this very prominent common theme that is in so many cultures about the tree. Lower world, upper world, and then the middle world. And usually we start with the lower world because it feels more accessible. And so for somebody who's just starting to do journeys, like that's usually where we go first. We meet our ancestors. They're here with us, very palpable, close. We might meet animal guides. We might work with elementals, things that experience this physical world that we are in as well. Then after that, usually, and there's different things we do there. There's different types of work we can do there. And then at some point, there'll be journeys to the upper world. And this is where we're connecting with spirit, for lack of another term, with some spirits that don't necessarily have an interest or a connection or an understanding of the physicality. It's a little more etheric, we might say. And we meet teachers and guides and energies that are there. And then after those are done, then usually there's that middle world. And in a lot of traditions, this middle world is considered scary or dangerous. There can be things that can harm. So it's often done like last. And it's the place where we're bringing the healing to. We go to those other places, we gain information or whatever needs to happen, and we're bringing it here to somebody on this plane. So that's where I think it deviates. And then again, it's different for all cultures. For me, what I like about Celtic shamanism, it feels a little more witchy. If it's okay for me to say that. Anyone out there who does Celtic shamanism, I'm not labeling it as witchy, but it feels a little more. To me, it leans into that a little bit because it's not the structured upper lower world. It's the other world. There's this world and the other world, and I can connect with the other world through the elements, through wells, through caves and caverns, through mist and rain that comes in. So there's this real strong energy on approaching it from a point of view of the elements, and then whereas the others work with elements, but it's just sort of where you start. And so for me, it lines up a lot with my basic feelings about being a witch and in the witchy world, as we've talked about a lot. I like to start with elements and then move into wherever I'm going from that starting place. I usually start with fire or an element, and from there, okay, wherever we're moving. So it kind of syncs up really well for me in that way. And I feel, to answer to get back to your question, I feel like when I'm doing Celtic shamanism, I'm walking the way of the witch and the shaman, and it's not an either or, and it's not like I'm leaving part of me behind. It feels right because I'm intertwining those different parts of me, and they all are coming together, which ultimately I think any kind of trance work we do is best when one is fully authentically themselves, wholly, and not leaving a part behind. I mean, if the work of the shaman is to help people be whole and retrieve parts of their soul, I certainly don't want to leave a part of me behind. I want all of that to be there with me, right? And it just feels much easier to do it through that lens.
So I'm and we can cut this if you want to, if we need to. But one of the things I see when I, for example, I work with you as in your with your astrologer hat on, but I see that healing in the way you approach explaining astrology to non specialists. So like when you're doing my chart, you explain the things that are going on in my chart for me in such a way that I use it for my personal development. I use it for healing. I use it for the ways that I can, okay, that makes sense. Now, how can I, as opposed to, am I going to get the boy, that kind of
Right.
stuff. It's more like, okay, so that explains a lot. That will help me as I move towards more balance, towards my higher self or whatever. And so would you say that's kind of, that's how I experience you? Is that is that an intentional part that you bringing these this healing aspect from your shamanic practice to other aspects of your life?
Wow, that's a good question.
Yay!
Oh, wow, I like that. I have to say, and it's going to make me think now about this, but I have to say when I'm doing astrology, I'm using my intuition. I'm definitely open to spirit communication, but I don't feel like I'm bringing a lot of my shamanic skills forward. I'm using intuition because when I'm doing astrology, there's very much that element of I want to be teacher / healer / guide. And I want to make sure that, you are getting something, like you said, that you can use for personal development. You understand. So I'm very much in my linear mind. And I'm walking back and forth between linear and nonlinear, right?
Gotcha.
But I'm in ordinary reality. Intuition is not, for me, it's not the same as non-ordinary reality. When I'm in non-ordinary reality, it's like when after a ritual and we're all sitting there and it's like, I got no words and I can't talk, right? I'm in a different space. So, and what's interesting is when I do shamanic work, I generally am not saying very much during the experience. Like, let's just say I'm doing a healing, and I'm working and I'm with somebody. It's not distance. Let's say it's those odd remote situations where somebody's like, I know you do it, and I trust you, and we're friends, and I want you to do it for me. Okay, come on over. And so let's just say I'm working with my rattle over someone. We're not talking. I've gone into a trance state. I'm on a journey. I am literally like not in the room. I'm in the room physically, but I am not in the room. I am now having a conversation with a spirit, a guide, an energy. I'm often working with helper spirits, where I'm having this image of, the spiders have come down and they're like removing everything and forming a net. And I'm having a total experience that is remote from the experience here, and I'm trusting that the person I'm working with is also having their own experience. And when it's over, I will share anything that I was told or informed is for that person. It's often very short. Like I might say, I was given an image of a such and such animal. You may want to think of that. I don't like to tell people this is your power animal. That's not my training. Nothing wrong with people who do that, but that's not me. But I'll say this or that came forward. But I'm very selective because so often a lot of what comes forward is coming forward in a way that I can connect with it so that I can bring healing to the person. It isn't, I'm working with spiders because they're my helper. That doesn't mean it's your helper, right? It's
understood.
So I try to, and I will journal about it. I'll write down my experiences because sometimes I'm having a healing while that person's having a healing. Our energies are intertwined, and so it's opening up space for all of us that are in the room, not just the two humans, but the animals and the tables and the desks, and the energy of the room is shifting. So when I'm in that state, there's very little of me being able to talk and explain and bring it to a level that makes sense. Yeah. And I think that's why I love it, because for me it balances out. If I'm very much in my ordinary reality mindset, but open and fluid there, in astrology, I get to be in non-ordinary reality completely when I'm over here. And the two really help me walk in this physical world because I have to have a balance of both.
Gotcha. And I'm going to choose to believe, regardless of what you may feel, I'm going to choose to believe that other world experience is bringing you balance it's increasing your power to heal. It's increasing your ability to heal. And so it can't help but come out of your mouth when you are using words, that energy, that power. And that's what comes to me when I'm, like, I'm sure I could have my chart read by someone else, and I'm definitely sure I would not have the experience I have when we go. I listen to you make a recording for me. It's like therapy sometimes. I just listen to it again and again, and each time, first of all, I'm looking at my chart. And then I just put it down.
Because it looks like Greek or some other language.
Exactly. It's a beautiful circle. It's kind of like I might be able to meditate on it like a mandala or
That's
something
what I
like
always tell people. Think of it as a mandala. Just
Yeah.
take in the energy, but don't worry about what it means.
Exactly. And then I close it up, and I can show you my notebook. I print them out and whole bit, and then I just kind of fold them up and tuck them in there. And then I just listen and just, what? And I always get obviously more, because at the time, the first time, it's like, okay, there's the information. But the second and third time I listen to it, there's more and more and more and more richness that for me is very, very healing. So I don't know. Maybe it's just like infusing your bones so that it comes out of your words whenever.
True.
Yeah.
And I think the more we make the time to journey and to do any of these techniques or practices, or to be in this space, or to just watch and listen from a shamanic place of being, the more we do that, right, the more I believe I am comfortable making time and space for intuition. So when I'm here in ordinary reality, I'm more likely to stretch and not be just boxy, linear, but, intuition and linear mind, they're talking with each other. So I do think it helps in that regard. And I have to say, I take it back, because as you're talking, I just remembered. So I recently did do a moment of kind of this like combo. It was brand new for me. It was so in the world of astrology, there's a lot of different techniques, and there's this one technique that you can do to kind of see what would your chart look like if it kept moving in the same motion and things didn't change in the sky, like things didn't have their cycles and patterns. What would it look? It's very theoretical, is my point. And I'm at a place where that theoretical has done a reset. Okay. And that happens about every 20 years. So I'm looking at it, I'm trying to understand it. And I don't know about y'all, like when you do tarot or other forms of divination, you find it harder to read for yourself than others.
Yes.
Yeah, same here. And in the shamanic world, they say that like journeying for others is so much easier than trying to journey for oneself, because the energy wants to innately give and serve. So I'm having a hard time reading for myself, and this is a big deal. It's a once every 20 years, and I couldn't figure out what it meant. And I could hear my guide saying, journey on it. So I did. I went and did a journey on. I just printed out the chart, put it on the pillow, laid down, and I'm like, I'm not going to turn off my logical, linear thinking mind, and we're just going to journey. And the what came forward was so different from what I thought. Then when I went back and looked at it with that linear mind, it's like, oh, I start to see how the energies are flowing now. So it was kind of cool, and it was different and unique, because I don't normally do that. But now, based on your question, I'm thinking I might try doing that some more and see what comes. How witchy woo-woo that feels.
Yes,
And then the other thing, okay, so thinking about being a witch, because Leilani, you were mentioning like how do those intersect? Well, the idea of personal gnosis for me has been huge, because there's only so much I can learn from listening to other people's podcasts or reading other people's research, right? There's also going to be the what does it mean to me? So that personal gnosis is important. And what I find is when I go do my personal journeys, it's often a sitting with a image. So like one of the big things we mentioned earlier, the trifold. So one of the big problems I had in the witchy world was Maiden Mother Crone. Was never my jam.
Same.
I feel like, and I mean, no offense to anyone who, if you love it, then you do it, please. But for me, it was like, you're defining me by my menstrual cycles and my abilities to birth or not. And that feels
I love you
really,
so much.
that feels really patriarchal. So I don't like it. And it's used a lot. And when you go down the world of the Celtic rabbit hole, everything is, the threefold. So I'm going back to, well, what exists before we had patriarchy and before we had these groups and before we had these cultures, and going back, what exists, and I like to look at the universal across all of the ancient Celtic countries, Iron Age, Pan-Celtic, big, huge area. what existed? Well, they all had these circles or circlish things with 3-spoked wheels. Right? The spiral, the three-pronged spiral, later became the triskelion, triquetra. Like, it never went away. Other cultures adopted. Like I said, what is the thing that you couldn't get rid of? You had to work with it. Okay, it never went away. The other cultures that came in and layered upon it kept it and tweaked it. But if you go way back on the ancient stones of the megalithic time, are these images painted or carved, etched in, right, of these three. So I'm like, okay, so this 3-spoked wheel. What is it? Is it, is it a sun? Is it, my linear mind is trying to identify it and box it. So I go and I do some journeys on it, and then it dawns on me, well, it's not a line with 3 spokes. It's a wheel. In other words, it's about the cyclical nature of threes, plural. It's not the 3, it's threes. And so I started thinking about land, sea, sky is the element groups that I work with. Oh, and life, death, rebirth. Oh, and when I started to think about the nature of threes and how threes will repeat, and when you get 3 threes, you have 9, and all of a sudden it didn't feel limiting. And so I came, so my witchiness influenced my shamanic practice, but then I came back and went to my Book of Shadows, or what I call the Book of Ways, and I came up with 3 versions of Maiden, 3 versions of Mother, 3 versions of Crone. The crone is not a crone. Crone is about the wise sage woman, but it's also about death, but it's also about mother time and the endless being, right? Okay, I now have 3 versions that are not based, that maiden mother crone is just one aspect of all the different 3s that I am. I now have 9 versions. Okay, now I'm really happy. And when I say maiden mother crone, my brain is negotiating it into what works for me.
Yeah.
So there's this interplay. Another one that hit me was, like, I was just thinking, well, what mattered? What mattered that we know mattered to the ancient cults? Well, we know trees were important, but groves. Not just a tree, but groves of trees. There's all these circles, right? Stone circles, tree circles. So I started going to the forest, trying to find, little mini ways I can get to a forest. And next year I'm looking at, are there forests I can go to? And what is my experience like if I was to do my, shamanic journey there in the forest rather than here, and how it might be different. Shape-shifting is really big in Celtic worlds. In fact, what I love, so the power of the word isn't just your word. It isn't just that your word is like an oath. It's also the words, the bards, the poetry. It is the song of, poetry is the song of the other world. So one of the things I love about Celtic shamanism is this idea of shape-shifting. And Tom Cohen theorizes that a lot of the ancient poetry was about shape-shifting, and we haven't interpreted it that way. I mean, I love this idea of, let's look at what we know, what it does exist, and let's broaden our understanding of what it could mean instead of what we've been taught it should mean, right? And so there's one of the really old poems is the poem of Amergin. I'm probably butchering the title, but something like that. And, supposedly Amergin steps onto the land there and says, I have right to be here because I am the wind, and I am the salmon, and it's beautiful. I really recommend you Google it and read it. It's gorgeous. But the idea is, maybe this isn't poetry. Perhaps this is speaking first person of, I have shapeshifted and been the string on the harp. I have been the drop of rain. I have been the leaf floating down. And what were you just sharing? We took a little break. You were sharing that song.
Oh,
what's that song?
Behold there. Oh, it's I am the air around you.
Yes.
I am the breath of life within you.
Yeah, and so we sing this in a lot of pagan circles and have that experience. They're just taking it further and like, okay, let's not just trance about it and visualize it. Let's become it. And so this idea of shape-shifting is my newest sort of passion, love, discovery of how do I do that? Because when I journey, as many people, I meet a spirit, an animal, a guide, and I see it with my, witchy eyes, my shamanic eyes. I see it around me or beside me. And so now I'm doing this, well, what would it be like if I became that and merged? And there's a lot of shamanic groups that do talk about the power of merging, and that is part of their practice. So I'm recognizing that even though we might call it something different, there can be areas of similarity between what a person who's traditionally trained from a cultural lineage of shamanism, and those of us who are modern and excavating our roots and trying to figure it out, we can learn, but we don't have to copy, I guess is where I'm getting at. I don't have to copy. I don't have to go outside and use ethically sourced sage to create a circle. I can do what's called a sane. I can be in my house, close the door, and burn rosemary or juniper, which is appropriate. It may or may not have been used in those cultures, but it's appropriate to those cultures, and it is similar in energy. I can learn from existing traditions how it is used and perhaps what experiences happen. But then figure out how do I apply that or reapply that to something that feels more. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with using sage. It's just that for me, I look at where those big triggers are, that there have been a lot of cultural misappropriation, and I try to avoid those things and do things that feel like it puts me more in alignment with my traditions. And the more I do that, the deeper I go.
That which speaks to one of the things I was going to ask is, one of the controversies in a lot of pagan, witchy, and I'm guessing shamanic circles is the idea of to what do we have authentic permission to draw upon. And it sounds, I'd love it if you could speak a little bit more. I mean, you've kind of said a little bit about that, but I'd love to hear more of your thoughts on that.
I'm curious, before I dive in, to know what is your definition of cultural misappropriation?
Cultural misappropriation for me is someone taking aspects of another culture, not in exchange, just taking it without its cultural context, usually for, in many cases, it's for like a self-defined purpose. But they're using all of the accoutrement of that other culture. So that's to me is misappropriation. I understand cultural exchange. I understand cultural appreciation, and I don't have many problems with. I still have some problems, but for the most part, because in my opinion, cultural exchange is rarely even. There's always that kind of colonial overshadow, but understanding that that's an area where I think intention can be a pretty powerful part of it. But misappropriation is definitely taking things out of its context, taking out a lot of the cultural power, and using it in many cases, in my opinion, for very shallow reasons. Sometimes it's actually they're using it as part of a sacred practice, but in my opinion, it's because they want that quick fix of that thing, as opposed to diving in deeply and understanding what that meant to that culture. And yes, like living it and breathing it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, so that's me. That was my long answer.
Yes,
Beautiful.
echo.
Beautiful.
What about for you, Leilani?
I would I would say the same thing as you. And the way I use it in my mind, the pillars of definition for me are, it's not consensual. So there's a power dynamic, and then there's layers of it's what tends to be white supremacy or classism. Somehow there's a power dynamic, and the appropriation is up power. So therefore it is not consensual in another way.
Yes. Yes. I echo both of what you're all saying. I would add to that too, that for me, especially from the lens of when I'm doing any kind of work in this world, when there's a lack of respect, when there's the ability to do harm, or when it will give me a unfair, unbalanced, inappropriate sense of power. Okay, those are my like defining like no-go kind of markers. And I think for me, the thing I see the most is when it comes to money. Somebody goes to Peru and they come back and they're like, I'm going to be a self-proclaimed teacher of blah blah blah. And not to say it's a spectrum.
I was just thinking the same thing.
So I'm like you said, cultural appreciation, and that's my spectrum. I'm like, I see it as like a threefold, of course. So there's cultural appreciation, there's appropriation, it's a word I use, and then there's cultural misappropriation. Misappropriation, I'm doing harm, I'm being disrespectful. or I'm doing something that's going to benefit me or mine, me or my people unfairly, taking advantage. Then there's, on the other end, cultural appreciation. I might go to somebody who's been trained and receive a healing. I might go take a class and learn about something from an experienced person who's been trained in that tradition. And then in the middle is, for me, is appropriation, which I kind of think innately happens. I think that's part of a cultural exchange, a healthy cultural exchange. From time memorial, I've got this art, I'm selling it to you. You're like, oh, you put circles on yours, or you put stags on your. I'm gonna start putting stags on mine. Like, there's a natural human nature of the sharing, and I'll give an example of what I mean, because I know like appropriation has become a bad word, and for me, it's misappropriation that's bad, because appropriation is sort of inevitable as we're sharing. But as long as it's done with respect and with understanding and not going for that easy, I'm going to do it this way because that's what I was taught. Is there another way I can do it that shows more respect? Is there another way I can do it that honors my ancestors, that honors the other people that taught me? And if not, okay, then let me do it with stating this was taught to me by so-and-so. This belongs to, not creating the eclectic, I'm putting everything together. Mm-hmm. I went to a store one time, and I was so horrified. I'm in this metaphysical store, and they have a drum, a round frame drum, made in Nepal. Mm-hmm. Okay, well, I understand that we are a global society now, and not everything is made by, fair trade people. Okay, fine. It's made in Nepal. It's a round frame drum. Not to say they didn't have round frame drums over there, okay. It had an image of a Celtic tree. Oh. And the description on the card talked about how the Norse god Odin hung from the tree. And I'm thinking to myself, this is not eclecticism. This is mass marketing. This is the quick fix, and this is the same thing can happen when the thing that goes right, it's like nails on a chalkboard, is when I meet somebody, often a new witch, and they're talking about Samhain.
Yes.
And I'm like, okay, it's Samhain. And I understand you didn't know that, you were reading it, but then take the time to be the person who does the excavation and go listen to a couple podcasts. Listen to the Witchy Wit podcast, where they have several episodes about Samhain and talk about how, because it's not just saying it wrong. Gaelic is a living language. So, so when we talk about appropriation and misappropriation, it's not just indigenous cultures that are getting misappropriated. The Celtic cash cow, as it's often referred to, is, totally taken and mixed, and people run amok with it and misuse it. And when we talk about like Celtic energies, the Welsh pantheon is different from the Brythonic pantheon, is different from Ireland, which doesn't necessarily have one pantheon, but a couple. And I heard somebody recently talk, and this, I'll tie this back to what we were saying about appropriation. I heard the Goddess podcast with Dr. Carla Ionesco, I think is her name. Oh my gosh, it's such an amazing show. It's long. She's long, but she's fabulous. It's worth listening to. So in one, she was interviewing somebody, and they were talking about how we have to remember when we're dealing with anything mythology or historical, quote unquote, that it exists in time. And so the practices, the shamanic practices that somebody had in the Paleolithic era were not the same as the shamanic practices they had a couple thousand years later when we're growing, corn or wheat or whatever was being grown at that time. And so throughout our history, things have changed and grown with us. And I think that's really important to think about, because if I'm talking about Celtic, I can take something that existed in one time period, but it's changed in a like Bridget, changed, grown, evolved. So what is the context of what I mean now? And I think when we take the quick and easy, this is what I read, I'm taking the shortcut, we're not acknowledging the time we're in, the energy that something once was. And if it's all about energy, if everything is inspirited, everything is imbued with energy, then I need to respect the energy of the energy I'm speaking about. All right. And how it has changed or grown or evolved. So I think that it's important to remember that cultural misappropriation can happen to any culture, language, society that is still existing and practicing today.
That makes, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
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 For sure.
So I love in the teachers that I have followed, I love one of the practices that just touches my heart is working with the three cauldrons of soul, or it comes from a poem, The Three Cauldrons of Poesy. And I know we've done, I've led some rituals around it. It's just, it speaks to me. And the idea is instead of working with chakras, that is a term and a concept that belongs to another culture that I totally respect and learn from and I utilize in my personal practice. But if I'm going outside of my personal practice, I want to talk about the three cauldrons of, of warming, of the mind, body, spirit, right? Those three cauldrons that live in the belly and the heart and the head. And there's amazing rich work that I can do there. I don't have to go to something else because that's what Google gives me.
Yes.
I don't have, I can learn from that, and I can perhaps learn how does another group work with these idea of body energy centers, like using common verbiage. And that's another thing that I'm big about when it comes to appropriation. I don't have to call it what somebody else called it unless I'm giving respect. Like in India, it is called chakras, or to people who practice yoga, it might be called chakras or something of that effect. In my system, it's called cauldrons. They both are about energy centers. How do you work with your energy centers? How can I learn? How can I take cross-cultural pollination or, a healthy appropriation? How can I take and learn and now apply it in my system?
Right.
And let me tell you about my system, and who knows, it might change or tweak the way you work. So here, it's that sharing leads to personal gnosis, leads to that blending. And for me, that's the sweet spot that I try to stay in. Another great example is the drum. So I get this a lot. Well, a lot of times I get some of the flack that I have received and had to, and I appreciated it because it forced me to stop and think. I'm a Caucasian American practicing shamanism. Is that or is that not true? And I'm like, well, is shamanism a good word or a bad word to begin with? Like, we can argue a lot there. So I've had to think about that. And then there's is Celtic shamanism really shamanism? Oh, here's a big one.
Okay.
Is Celtic shamanism really shamanism? Is a big discussion within the community because, as I mentioned, shamanism usually refers to something that is much more ancient and unbroken. And so we are recreating or excavating. So can something be shamanism if you're recreating it?
Wow.
That's a big question.
Yeah.
And of course it depends on, who's defining it. So if you'll allow me to soapbox for just a second. I don't like the word shamanism because shamanism is an American creation based on a word from another culture.
Yep.
Right? We had, and I understand that things exist within the context of the time. So in that time, in Victorian and Edwardian times, it's a different society. Things were different. We could go, I'm trying not to go way off topic, but we could go to another culture, do some archaeology and steal their objects and bring them back. And it was okay, culturally speaking. Yep. And now we're like, no, it's not. So things change. I get that. But the bottom line is, in my mind, what I have read is that you had scholars, academics, researchers, archaeologists going to another culture, seeing people do this, which was a new experience, seeing people do shamanic work. Oh, well, what do we call it? Oh, well, there's this word that we think means, and people still argue about, linguists will argue, does the root word that the word shaman comes from a cultural group up in Russia, does that word even mean what we think it means? Because they assumed it meant one who sees in the dark. But now people are arguing, does it or doesn't it? So I'm like, oh my gosh, this word is embroiled with argument. And then not only did they take one of their words and apply it to them, perhaps improperly, perhaps properly, but then they also said, oh, well, not only do you do this, but this group over here does it, and these two groups over here do it. So we're going to use this word universally. That's my contention.
Okay. A
person who's practicing animism in the Levant, which is actually, I think, where the oldest frame drum has been found to date. I'm sure they'll find one older. But somebody who practices it there is not the same as somebody who's a Sami up in the northern reaches of Finland.
Right.
How can you tell me it's the same word? I mean, you know, you might say healer, like a general broad term, but we're creating a word and assuming that word has specific belief and practices, yada, yada, yada. So that's kind of my issue. I don't know how I got off on that tangent, but sorry.
That's fine.
Lingual colonialism. I have an issue with it.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Ooh, lingual colonialism.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, what were we talking about?
Sorry. No, that's fine. We've gone so far afield, but and we're going to start bringing it on home. But no, I really because that so resonates for me that how could the same word mean an indigenous population in the United States or Latin America, in Africa, various parts of Africa, in the Caucasus, in Russia, in the steppes, and they all have the same name.
Yes.
Applied by people who aren't even from that culture.
Exactly.
Who probably they see all these commonalities because they're not digging deeply,
right,
and seeing all the different ways that they.
Yes, and that is, I think, the basis of people who do core shamanism practices or teachings, and when you're not enmeshed in a particular tradition, you can see commonalities perhaps easier. I'm not denoting. I'm just saying, like, let's not label people based on. Let's ask the questions.
Yes.
Oh, drums. That's where we were at.
Okay, yeah.
So people will say, people within shamanic circles, I've often read things people say about Celtic shamanism is not real shamanism. Now, on the one hand, one really has to be careful because, as I already mentioned, Celtic is a word that's layered with mass marketing. Shamanism is a word also layered with mass marketing. So it's really easy to Google Celtic shamanism and wind up on a site that's bunk, right? That is really just misappropriating a lot of different beliefs and calling it their own. That said, there's a lot of really genuine, wonderful teachers out there who do this and are taking ideas of shamanism through a Celtic lens, and what does that mean? So one of the things that I've heard as the rebuttals of you cannot be a Celtic shaman because Celts didn't play drums, which really drives me nuts. So I just want to say that the frame drum is not owned by any particular culture, group, nation, country, continent.
Yeah.
The oldest frame drum, as I mentioned, was found, in the Middle East, in the Levant. There are some found in many different cultures around the world. There is no currently ancient traditional Irish drum. The bodhrán that people like to play, I'm learning how to play now. It's only about 150, maybe 200 years old. People argue about that, but relatively speaking, it's a more modern invention. But there's no doubt that our foremothers and their foremothers at some point were playing the drum. It has existed universally. So I don't have a Celtic drum to model my frame drum on. So here's a point of appropriation. I bought my drum from a person who made the drums themselves, who ethically sourced the materials, who did a shamanic ceremony honoring the energy of the skin and the wood and the fur before it was assembled, and encouraged me to do that once I had it, to call in the energies of the drum by all the things it's made of. And that person is a Caucasian person who was trained by somebody who was of an indigenous culture. Well, I don't feel that's misappropriating because there's a lot of respect. There is no harm. There is no massive amounts of profit, and it is all done with the knowledge that this was not initially this person's knowledge. By the same token, I can't create what the ancient Druids would have used as a drum because nobody wrote about it. No, the Romans didn't write about it because they were caring more about warfare and leadership. They really didn't care what was happening elsewhere. And I'm of the mindset that probably the ancient Celtic societies were probably not showing it. And, to people who were not, deemed worthy enough to be in the inner mystery sanctum. And my idea of Celtic goes way beyond the Celts, who were a strongly patriarchal group. I'm looking at what existed before them.
Before the Picts.
Yes, exactly. So putting all that together, I'm like, is there some appropriation when I'm playing my drum? Yes. Is it respectful? Is it healthy? Yes. Do I feel like I can't say Celtic shamanism because we don't have an actual archaeological evidence of a drum. No. So that's where I'm saying, like, to me, it's a spectrum, and we have to think about the intention of where we're coming from. And we also have to think about, I believe, how does it feel on the other side?
Yes.
For me,
Yes.
it is so
Yes.
often that people will say to me, I don't feel that I am misappropriating. Well, have you listened to anyone of the other culture group to see, do they feel you are or aren't? And not that that's even universal. I know that within a lot of different American indigenous groups, there's often, we've discussed this, controversy about songs. And, you know, there could be one group that says, I'm teaching the song to people who are not of our tribe, and another part of the same tribe says, no, that's not okay. And so I think it's a very personal thing. We all have a different place we sit on that spectrum.
Yes.
But for me, it's about do no harm.
Yes.
Which, isn't that a basic, like, witchy
Yeah.
tenet for most people? When possible, do no harm, or as little as possible.
Yeah.
Strive to learn more and grow. So
For
that's
sure.
that's my whole thing. So I think we have to learn about indigenous concepts, philosophies, opinions about this. And we also have to think about what are the, not necessarily indigenous, but the still living, current, vibrant. I mean, in Egypt, there are now groups that are revivalists of ancient traditions. In all of the things that come to us from the different Caribbean and these are living traditions. We read about it and think, oh, I'm reading it in a book, but it's a living tradition. Celtic, well, maybe Celtic's not a living tradition, but Gaelic is.
Yes.
And in Wales, they have their own language and culture and pantheon. So, you know, my point is it's not really simple. And if you're looking for the quick answer, I think we're doing harm. We have to take the time to learn what's behind some of this and understand, am I unintentionally harming other people?
You know, it comes back to impact versus intent, right? So, you know,
Bingo.
Yeah,
Bingo,
yeah,
yes.
exactly. So, as we start to bring it on home, I would love it if you could share, like, just, I mean, like, parting words. If people could take like one or two ideas from your thinking about shamanic practices, what would that be that you really want our listeners, all 8 of them, to know, to know?
Okay. So 2 things. The first is a very simple one. If you have a question about shamanism, journey on it. I mean, my first teacher, that was every time I had a question and I wanted to know, and what is the belief on this, and what about, and he'd look at me and say, that's a good question. Journey on it. And yeah. And
I wish I could have said that when I was in the classroom.
Right.
and it's so true, because a lot of this personal gnosis comes from the teachings I received from my guides in non-ordinary reality. It's not going to make sense to just talk about it. I have to experience it. I have to know it. So that's the first thing.
Thank you.
So that also means that the first thing is learn how to journey.
Right.
There are numerous classes, workshops, groups. I've mentioned a few. I'll send you the links to the ones that I like. You know, find one that you feel speaks to you and sounds reputable, and learn how to journey. Practice it. And doing it in a class is so much easier because we get to journey for each other. And as I mentioned, when I'm journeying for someone, it's so much easier than when I'm journeying for myself.
For sure.
So, and you get those shared experiences and collective energy. So that's one. The other is, it's okay to not know exactly what kind, you know, and this is so true even in the witchy world, right? What kind of witch am I going to be? How about we just start the practice? We start the process. So I think the next thing is, what is one thing you want to learn? What is the one thing you've heard about shamanism that speaks to you? And after you've learned to journey, we'll go learn that technique. Maybe it's about, I want to find my power animal, or I want to be a healer who does extractions, or what is it? There's a lot of information and it's easy to be overwhelmed. So how about we just back up and start with, what is the one thing that speaks to you? Often this path is a windy path. It is unique, and you don't necessarily know the next step until you've taken the one you're in. To me, shamanism is a form of a mystery school. And so knowing that I can't learn everything before I do it, I must take a step into the doing and the being. And now I learn how to do that better and more fully. And then I have to take that next step. So trusting your intuition, listening to what you think are signs from your guides, learning how to journey, I think is where to start. And then when you find somebody who speaks to your soul as a teacher, follow them. They may be your only teacher. They may be your first of many, but follow that. It's a process that is constantly unfolding. And so if we trust in that process rather than being the typical adult learner that says, I must know and master everything first, no, take that step.
Thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, did you want to say something?
I was going to say, is it time to share a poem?
Well, before we do that,
Yes.
I'd love to hear, first of all, so I'm sure I'm cutting you short. So we just squeezed all of you in an episode. and I what if people would like to hear more of your thinking? Would like to get some more ideas from you? What's the best way that people can hear from you?
Okay, well, there's a couple of ways. I'm most accessible through astrology. So, Astrology with Kimberly
And I'll put this
is my moniker. I'm on Facebook. I have a Facebook page. I'm somewhat on Instagram, but I have lingered. So I will be reinvigorating that in the coming year. I can also be emailed, Kimberly@astrologywithkimberly.com. This is the direct way to get a hold of me. And then starting in January, I'm launching a new YouTube. And the YouTube will be Astrology with Kimberly. And I'm excited. It's going to be a bit YouTube, a bit podcasty, a bit that, and focusing on pagan feminist astrology, which is my lens.
Yes.
For the person who's an astrology enthusiast. In other words, I like it. I want to know more. I don't want to have to read a bunch of reference books. I'm not necessarily looking for the studious approach because there's a lot of great information already out there that covers it. This is more, I want to know how this can help me affect my personal growth and development. I want to be able to understand, what does Mercury retrograde mean? Because I see memes about it 3 times a year. And what is that about? Those kind of core questions.
Okay, well, thank you so much. And I do believe in the Witchy Witch tradition that you have a poem.
I do.
You do?
Okay,
I
yes.
do. Give me 1 second to
Okay.
pull it up. So this is a poem called Axioms for Wildness. And it's by John O'Donohue, which lots of folks are familiar with. Celtic spiritualist. Some called him a Celtic shaman. Just an amazing ability to write the song of the other world, in my opinion. And this is from, I believe, his book, To Bless the Space Between Us.
Ooh, I just love the title.
I know, right? So, and to me, Axioms for Wildness, it speaks about how I feel when I am in a shamanic state. Alive to the thrill of the wild, meet the dawn of a mountain. Wash your face in the morning dew. Feel the favor of the earth, get out naked in the wind, your skin almost aeolian. With the music inside, dance like there is no outside. Become subtle enough to hear a tree breathe. Sleep by the ocean, letting yourself unfurl like the reeds that swirl gradually on the seafloor. Try to watch a painting from within, how it holds what it never shows. The mystery of your face, showing what you never see. See your imagination dawn around the rim of your world. Feel the seamless silk of the ocean womb you in ancient buoyancy. Feel the wild imprint of surprise when you are taken in by your lover's eyes. Succumb to warmth in the heart where divine fire glows.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing with
Axioms for Wildness.
For wildness, and giving us a little bit of a glint into the mystery and animism and wildness in your soul and your practice.
Yes.
We so appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you. I so appreciate being able to be here and talk and just share kind of unadulterated ideas about Celtic shamanism.
We hope you have enjoyed the magic that has unfolded here at Witchy Wit.
It would be great if you would help make Witchy Wit possible and get access to exclusive content by donating on Patreon.
We'd love it if you join our Witchy community and enjoy shareable content on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube.
Would you do us a big favor and support us by rating and reviewing us wherever you get your podcasts? It's free and helps witchy folks find us.
Feel free to email us at witchywitpodcast@gmail.com. We love to hear from our community. Reach out and let us know what's brewing in your cauldron.
New episodes are released every second and fourth Friday. Follow us on your favorite podcasting platform so our episodes go right to your playlist. You can listen as you ride your broom.
Stay witchy, y'all!